The moment the clock hits 0 in Cleveland, you could feel the air shift. This wasn't just another loss on a disappointing season. It was a meltdown that sent shockwaves through every corner of the franchise. The Browns walked into their own stadium as 12-point favorites against a Titans team that had managed just one lonely win all year. They were supposed to cruise, dominate, and give their fans something to believe in. Instead, they walked out stunned, embarrassed, and staring down a disaster nobody saw coming. Losing is one thing, but losing at home to a 1-11 team in front of a fan base that has already endured years of heartbreak? That's the kind of defeat that cracks open every hidden problem inside an organization. And this wasn't even a chaotic back-and-forth game. Cleveland looked disjointed, unfocused, and completely unprepared for a Titans roster that has been playing for draft position more than anything else. But what truly turned this loss into something nuclear wasn't the scoreboard. It was the way the Browns unraveled in the biggest moments. It was the feeling that the coaching staff had no answers. It was the growing realization around the league that something deeper, something structural, might be failing inside Cleveland. And that sinking feeling only intensified when fans realized what this loss had set in motion. Because the fallout was just beginning. While fans were still processing the shock of Sunday's collapse, something far more alarming was already happening behind the scenes. Within hours of the loss, reports began circulating that Browns owner Jimmy Haslam had taken an extraordinary step. The kind of move NFL owners almost never make during the season, let alone in early December. According to multiple insiders, Haslam called an emergency board meeting to address the state of the franchise, and specifically, the future of his head coach, Kevin Stefanski. For context, NFL front offices don't call emergency meetings after a routine loss. Even bad losses often get chalked up to execution errors, injuries, or off days. This one didn't. This one hit a nerve so deep that ownership felt the need to intervene immediately. That alone tells you the level of frustration boiling inside the building. People close to the situation claim that Haslam watched the game in growing disbelief, questioning the decisions being made on the sidelines, especially the choice to pull Shedeur Sanders during the most crucial moments of the game. But frustration turned to something far more serious once the aftermath hit. Once analysts, former players, and even members of the Browns roster began expressing confusion over what exactly the coaching staff was trying to accomplish. That's when Haslam decided enough was enough. Sources suggest the tone of this emergency meeting wasn't "let's talk it out" casual. It was tense, direct, and pointed. The agenda? Determining whether Kevin Stefanski still had the trust of ownership, the locker room, and the future cornerstone of the franchise, Shedeur Sanders. Meetings like this usually happen after the season ends. When the owner steps in with 4 games left on the schedule, it signals that something foundational is at risk. Either the relationship between coach and quarterback, the confidence of the locker room, or the trajectory of the franchise itself. And Haslam isn't just asking questions about the loss. He's asking bigger ones. Is the team improving or getting worse? Is the coaching staff developing the rookie quarterback or stalling him? Is there a leadership issue growing behind the scenes? What makes this moment even more dramatic is that Stefanski isn't just any coach. He's a former Coach of the Year, once praised for bringing stability to Cleveland. But now, the very man, tense, direct, and pointed. The agenda? Determining whether Kevin Stefanski still had the trust of ownership, the locker room, and the future cornerstone of the franchise, Shedeur Sanders. Meetings like this usually happen after the season ends. When the owner steps in with 4 games left on the schedule, it signals that something foundational is at risk. Either the relationship between coach and quarterback, the confidence of the locker room, or the trajectory of the franchise itself. And Haslam isn't just asking questions about the loss. He's asking bigger ones. Is the team improving or getting worse? Is the coaching staff developing the rookie quarterback or stalling him? Is there a leadership issue growing behind the scenes? What makes this moment even more dramatic is that Stefanski isn't just any coach. He's a former Coach of the Year, once praised for bringing stability to Cleveland. But now, the very man who symbolized progress is being discussed in a meeting reserved for emergencies. And the most shocking part? This meeting was only the beginning. The real storm began when everyone realized exactly why Haslam was so upset and what he believed the coaching staff jeopardized on Sunday. At the center of this entire explosion sits one decision, one moment so baffling, so universally criticized, that it became the catalyst for everything that followed. The Browns weren't just fighting for pride on Sunday. They were fighting to regain momentum, rebuild trust, and salvage something meaningful from a collapsing season. And for most of the game, it looked like Shedeur Sanders was going to give them exactly that spark. The rookie was electric. He threw for 364 yards, 3 touchdowns, and played with a confidence that had analysts across the league saying the same thing. The kid is turning into something special. Drive after drive, he kept Cleveland alive, delivering the kind of poise the team spend years searching for in a young quarterback. But then came the moment no one could explain. With the game on the line, twice, Kevin Stefanski made the stunning choice to pull Shedeur off the field for 2-point conversions that could have changed everything. Instead of trusting the quarterback who had carried the team all afternoon, Stefanski turned to wildcat formations that felt ripped from a completely different reality. And they didn't just fail. They fell apart instantly, leaving fans speechless and players staring in disbelief. The reactions were immediate. Social media erupted. Analysts couldn't hide their confusion. Even neutral observers were asking the same question. Why take the ball out of the hottest player's hands in the biggest moment of the game? The answer only made things worse. Stefanski later admitted that he had already planned to run those wildcat plays before the final drive even began, before he saw Shedeur orchestrate that brilliant 80-yard march down the field, before he watched the rookie make multiple pressure throws, before he witnessed the kind of performance that earns trust, not removes it. In other words, the decision wasn't based on the moment. It wasn't based on the game. It wasn't based on what Shedeur was proving in real time. It was predetermined. And that revelation is what sent everything spiraling. Because it didn't just look like a bad call. It looked like a refusal to adapt, a lack of trust in the rookie, and a coaching philosophy completely disconnected from what was happening on the field. Inside the locker room, players felt that disconnect. Inside the front office, executives heard the backlash. And inside ownership, Jimmy Haslam realized this wasn't just a coaching mistake. It was a warning sign. In the hours after the loss, while fans were still arguing online and analysts were replaying the failed conversions on national TV, one voice rose above the noise, the voice of Myles Garrett. And when the face of your franchise steps to the microphone, people listen. Garrett is not someone who speaks recklessly or throws his coaches under the bus. He's respected across the league for his professionalism and measured tone, which is why what he said hit harder than if anyone else had said it. He didn't rant. He didn't point fingers. He didn't call anyone out by name. Instead, he did something far more powerful. He praised Shedeur Sanders again and again, making it clear just how strongly he believed the rookie had earned the right to stay on the field in those defining moments. Garrett highlighted Shedeur's composure, his escape ability, his playmaking under pressure. He talked about the growth he was seeing each week, the confidence building with every snap, the signs of a quarterback who was ready for more responsibility, not less. Every compliment carried a deeper message. This is our guy, and he deserved more trust than he was given. And the subtext didn't take long to decode. Because when your defensive captain, your most respected veteran, and one of the NFL's biggest stars goes out of his way to emphasize how well the quarterback played, he's not just praising the rookie. He's questioning the decision to bench him. Quietly, carefully, professionally, but unmistakably. People inside the organization felt it instantly. Players heard it. Reporters picked up on it. And Jimmy Haslam, he took it personally. Not as an attack, but as a confirmation. Because Garrett's tone matched everything Haslam had been thinking as he watched the game. Why wasn't the rookie trusted? Why was the ball taken out of his hands? Why are we limiting the one thing that finally looks promising in Cleveland? Garrett didn't need to say those words. His praise said it for him. What makes his comments even more significant is the timing. Garrett had just made history that day, becoming one of the fastest players in NFL history to reach 100 career sacks. It should have been a moment about him. Instead, he used his platform to uplift his quarterback and raise questions that leadership could no longer ignore. And that is when everything shifted. Because when the locker room's leader speaks softly, ownership hears it loudly. While Myles Garrett's words were circulating across social media, Jimmy Haslam was already deep in his own storm of frustration. People close to the situation say the Browns' owner didn't just watch Sunday's loss, he absorbed it. Every stalled drive, every defensive breakdown, every moment of confusion on the sideline seemed to push him closer to a breaking point. But nothing rattled him more than watching Shedeur Sanders get pulled off the field during the exact moments he had earned the right to lead. Haslam isn't new to disappointment. He's seen coaching mistakes, locker room fractures, and quarterback failures over more than a decade of ownership. But what he saw against Tennessee struck a nerve that went far deeper than a bad play call. To him, it looked like a threat to the future, a danger to the one thing Cleveland hasn't had in decades, a young quarterback with real, tangible franchise potential. Inside sources claim Haslam kept asking the same question over and over while watching the game. Why are we not trusting the kid? And as the press conference replayed afterward and Stefanski confirmed that he had pre-planned the Wildcat calls regardless of how the drive unfolded, Haslam's frustration shifted into something more serious. Fear. Fear that the coaching staff wasn't adjusting. Fear that they weren't recognizing what they had in Shedeur. Fear that the Browns might mismanage yet another quarterback just as signs of promise were finally emerging. Those fears aren't baseless. Cleveland's past is littered with talented players who were derailed by instability and poor decisions. Haslam has lived through that cycle far too many times, and the mere thought of repeating it with a rookie who has exceeded expectations was reportedly unbearable. Then came Myles Garrett's comments. And that, insiders say, was the moment everything clicked. Garrett didn't accuse anyone of anything, but his praise of Shedeur confirmed exactly what Haslam had felt watching the game. The players believed in the rookie, even if the coaching staff didn't show it. To an NFL owner, that's a flashing red warning sign. Haslam realized that this wasn't just a one-game issue. It wasn't just a misread moment. It was beginning to look like a philosophical divide, a growing disconnect between the head coach and the future of the franchise. And that realization is what pushed Haslam from frustrated to furious, because he wasn't just watching a loss. He was watching the foundation of his team tremble. To understand why Jimmy Haslam reacted so strongly, you have to understand the history weighing on every decision this franchise makes at the quarterback position. In Cleveland, the word quarterback doesn't just describe a role, it describes a curse. For more than 2 decades, the Browns have cycled through signal callers the way some teams cycle through practice squad receivers. Every time they thought they'd finally found the guy, the promise collapsed into disappointment. Since 1999, the Browns have started more quarterbacks than any team in the league. High draft picks fizzled. Mid-round sleepers never woke up. Veterans came and went without leaving a trace. The list is long enough to rival an entire roster. Tim Couch, Brady Quinn, Colt McCoy, Brandon Weeden, Johnny Manziel, DeShone Kizer, Baker Mayfield, Jacoby Brissett, Deshaun Watson, and that's barely scratching the surface. Names that once carried hope now read like reminders of everything the franchise has failed to build. That history matters. It hangs over the organization like a shadow they can't outrun. And it's exactly why Shedeur Sanders' emergence has felt like a breath of fresh, unfamiliar air. He wasn't supposed to be this polished this early. He wasn't supposed to look this calm under pressure. He wasn't supposed to energize the fan base the way he already has. Yet week by week, he's doing all of that and more. For the first time in years, Browns fans can look at a young quarterback and see potential, not problems. They see someone who can grow into a leader, who can stabilize the offense, who can finally break the cycle of disappointment. And ownership sees it too. They see a rookie who's outperforming expectations, gaining respect in the locker room, and showing flashes that franchises spend decades trying to find. Which is precisely why the mishandling of Sunday's crucial moments didn't feel like a simple mistake. It felt like a threat to the one thing Cleveland has been afraid to lose again: hope. Because when a team with this kind of quarterback trauma finally finds someone who looks like the real deal, every decision around him carries extra weight. You don't bench a player like that lightly. You don't undermine his confidence casually. You don't gamble with his development, because in Cleveland, losing a promising quarterback isn't just a setback. It's a nightmare the city has lived through far too many times already. And for Haslam, watching history threaten to repeat itself was the moment he realized something deeper was unraveling. As the dust settled from Sunday's meltdown, one detail rose above every other storyline: Kevin Stefanski's unwavering commitment to a decision that made absolutely no sense in real time. Nobody expected the Browns head coach to be perfect, but what stunned players, fans, and even league insiders was Stefanski's own admission about the two failed two-point attempts. He revealed that he had planned those Wildcat plays before the drive even began, no matter what unfolded on the field. And that's when everything shifted from confusion to concern. Because a coach can make a bad call. A coach can misread a moment. But deciding ahead of time that your rookie quarterback, who was playing the best game of his young career, wouldn't be the one to touch the ball in the biggest situation, that speaks to something much deeper. It suggests rigidity. It suggests ego. It suggests a refusal to adjust even when the evidence is unfolding right in front of you. Shedeur Sanders had just delivered an 80-yard scoring drive filled with clutch throws, pocket movement, and the kind of command that earns the respect of both teammates and coaches. He looked calm, confident, ready, yet none of that mattered because the decision was already locked in Stefanski's mind. To ownership, that wasn't a strategy, it was a red flag. Players saw it too. They knew Shedeur had earned those moments. They knew momentum was on his side. They knew the defense was reeling and the rookie had the Titans guessing. But the team's hottest hand was taken off the field because the game plan said so, not because the moment demanded it. And in the NFL, nothing kills trust faster than ignoring the moment. This wasn't simply bad situational coaching. It was the kind of decision that forces an organization to ask whether the head coach's philosophy aligns with the direction the franchise needs to go. When a rookie quarterback is showing real promise, you build around him. You adapt to him. You elevate him. You don't sideline him during the biggest plays of the season. And that's why this moment became a turning point. The evidence that Stefanski's might be clashing with the future Cleveland is trying to build. Once Jimmy Haslam called the emergency meeting, the tone inside the Browns headquarters shifted from frustration to full-on interrogation mode. This wasn't a casual check-in. This wasn't a routine Monday debrief. This was ownership demanding clarity, accountability, and answers to questions the coaching staff could no longer avoid. And the biggest question hanging in the air was simple yet explosive. Does Kevin Stefanski truly believe Shedeur Sanders is the franchise quarterback? Because if he does, then his decisions on Sunday make no sense. Why pull a rookie who had earned the trust of his teammates? Why turn away from the player who had carried the offense all afternoon? Why send the message, intentional or not, that his performance wasn't enough to earn the right to decide the game? But if Stefanski doesn't believe in Shedeur, then the Browns have an even bigger problem on their hands, a philosophical rift between the head coach and the front office. And that kind of disconnect doesn't fix itself. It only grows louder, more disruptive, and more damaging as time goes on. Inside that meeting, several critical questions reportedly surfaced. What is the plan for the final 4 games? Are the Browns going to lean into Shedeur's development, allowing him to learn through high-pressure moments? Or will the staff continue to limit him with pre-planned decisions that ignore the flow of the game? Is the coaching staff aligned on the rookie's future? If different voices inside the building see Shedeur differently, the organization risks sending mixed messages that slow down or even derail his progress. And perhaps the most important question of all, what are the long-term consequences if the Browns mishandle the best quarterback prospect they've had in decades? These aren't minor concerns. These are existential questions about the franchise's direction. When ownership is forced to ask them in December, not after the season ends, it signals a level of urgency that can't be ignored. And as those questions hung over the room, one thing became obvious. This wasn't just about a failed 2-point conversion. It was about whether the Browns' leadership is moving in the same direction or pulling the franchise apart. Before anyone labels Kevin Stefanski as simply the problem, it's important to understand why this situation is so complicated for the Browns. Stefanski isn't a random coach hanging onto his job by a thread. He's a former coach of the year, the man who delivered Cleveland its first playoff victory since 1994. He brought stability, structure, and professionalism to a franchise that desperately needed all 3. For a while, fans believed he might finally be the answer after decades of instability. That's what makes this crisis so unsettling. It's not just the downfall of a struggling coach, it's the unraveling of someone who once symbolized hope. Since that breakout 2020 season, the results have become increasingly uneven. The Browns went from surprise contenders to a team marked by inconsistency, regression, and questionable in-game decisions. Injuries, quarterback turnover, and roster chaos have all played a part. But at some point, leadership has to rise above circumstances. Instead, Cleveland's progress stagnated, and this season, it collapsed entirely. Yet firing Stefanski isn't a simple choice for Jimmy Haslam. On one hand, sticking with him risks prolonging a coaching philosophy that may not mesh with the development of Shedeur Sanders. On the other hand, Haslam knows his own reputation. Critics already view him as an owner who pulls the trigger too quickly, cycling through head coaches before they have time to build anything lasting. Moving on from Stefanski would only amplify that narrative. But here's the reality shaking the walls in Cleveland. This decision isn't about protecting an owner's image. It's about protecting the future of the franchise. If the head coach and the rookie quarterback aren't aligned, one of them has to go. And the Browns aren't about to give up on the most promising quarterback they've had in years. That's why this situation feels like a tipping point. Stefanski's past success doesn't erase his present shortcomings, and the dilemma facing Haslam is no longer philosophical, it's practical. The team is regressing, the locker room is losing confidence, and the rookie quarterback's growth may be getting hindered. And those realities force a harsh question. Is Stefanski still the man to lead this team forward? Or has his moment in Cleveland already passed? As the Browns navigate the fallout from Sunday's disaster and the heated conversations inside the emergency board meeting, one thing has become unmistakably clear. The franchise is standing at a crossroads. Every path forward carries consequences, and every decision will shape not just the remainder of this season, but the next several years of Cleveland football. One possibility, though rare in the NFL, is an in-season coaching change. It's drastic, disruptive, and typically avoided unless a team is in complete freefall. But insiders suggest the idea isn't off the table. If ownership feels Stefanski has lost the locker room or jeopardized Shedeur Sanders' development, Haslam could choose to pull the plug immediately. In that scenario, defensive coordinator Jim Schwartz or another senior staff member could be elevated to interim head coach, stabilizing the team through the final 4 games. Another option is letting Stefanski finish the season, but signaling internally that the organization is preparing to move on. This would allow for a full evaluation period, a broader search for the next head coach, and a cleaner transition heading into the offseason. It also prevents the chaos that usually follows abrupt mid-season firings. But the most intriguing possibility, and the one that insiders say could hinge entirely on how Stefanski responds, is a commitment to moving forward with him, but under new expectations. That would require full alignment around Shedeur Sanders' development, greater offensive flexibility, and a willingness to adjust the rigid game planning that has frustrated players and fans alike. It's the least dramatic option, but also the most difficult, because it demands genuine philosophical change from a coach known for his structure and system. Whichever path the Browns choose, everything now revolves around one thing: maximizing the growth of Shedeur Sanders. He is the future. He is the investment. He is the potential. Franchise quarterback Cleveland has spent decades searching for, and every decision, from coaching hires to offensive schemes to leadership dynamics, must reflect that priority. Sunday's loss wasn't just another mark in the standings. It was a turning point, the moment that forced the Browns to confront hard truths and make harder choices. Now, the question is simple. Will Cleveland finally choose the path that leads forward, or repeat the mistakes that have haunted them for years?